thank all of you for that warm introduction, and Todd, thank you. I'm really grateful to you and your family for the service you've given to the state, both in the state legislature and the House, and the service you will give to the country. So it's an honor to me to be here, and I thank you for that. I'm going to outline for you a couple steps about winning, and we're taping it, and they're going to make the tape available to all of you. And let me just ask a couple simple questions. How many of you do text messaging? Raise your hand. How many of you do Twitter? How many of you do Facebook? How many of you do emails? I will bet you that if you could take all of the electronic connectivity in this room, you would actually just about match the St. Louis newspaper. Part of what I'm going to do while chatting with you is create an audio that you'll be able to use, that you can just send out to your friends across the state and ask them to send it out across the state. And you gradually build a real network. And my principles are simple. Look, you don't have a hard problem here. I've seen the polling data. I know about where the people of Missouri are. This is a very winnable race. And when we get done winning it, we're going to have a great victory party. And we're going to be magnanimous. With the permission of Todd and his family, we're going to invite every idiotic naysayer in Washington to come to the victory party. You can't educate them if you don't get them in the tent. So I'm going to start from there. I've been in difficult circumstances. I was a Republican volunteer in Georgia in 1960 when the entire state party was smaller than this room. I ran for Congress for the first time in 1974 in the middle of Watergate. I ran a second time in '76 with Jimmy Carter at the head of the Democratic ticket. I lost both times. So today Georgia has 2 U.S. senators, a majority of the House delegation, every statewide elected official starting with the governor, and control of both the House and the Senate. So you can make progress. Now it helps if you have Democrats handing it away, but nonetheless, you can make progress. So let me talk a couple minutes candidly about this race, and then I'm going to take some questions, and then you all are going to have to sign up or do whatever you have to do, or go to his website. They'll figure out the technology. But we'll have a file there that everybody will be able to send everywhere. And we'll also make it available to the news media. One of the ways you avoid doing things like 47% comments is you always assume you're being taped. So I never say anything that I don't expect to have in the Washington Post. Now, I have said some fairly foolish things, but I wasn't shocked. Now, my wife will occasionally look at me and say, "Lunar colony." She's convinced it's the dumbest single thing I said in the campaign. I still think it's a cool idea. It does a difference. So let me start with the fact, and Todd's been very clear about this. He made a mistake. He said something really dumb. And he came back and he said, "I made a mistake. I said something really dumb." And he apologized to the people of Missouri. Now, I just want to start with the news media standard and the Republican establishment standard. If saying something dumb disqualified you, Biden would have to resign tonight. The President of the United States, on 60 Minutes last night, said that we had faced a bump in the road. I do not regard the killing of an American ambassador and the killing of 3 other Americans as a bump in the road. I regard it as a tragedy, and I believe the President owes the entire country an apology for that kind of writing. So, After all, this is a president who thought that all 57 states. You remember that?
Yeah.
Did anybody on the left say, ought to step down? You don't even know how many states are on your country. Maybe you ought to be at the UN. So let's be clear. This is a race that offers as clear a choice as there is anywhere in America. And you're about to see $8 or $10 or $12 million spent on trash because Claire McCaskill can't possibly run a fact-based, honest, positive campaign. It's not possible. It would be a suicide note. If she came home and said, hi, I really enjoyed running over all of you after you voted no on Obamacare. It made me feel good to know that as a senator, I could ignore 3 out of every 4 Missourians. It's not a winning theme. Re-elect me and I'll ignore you for 6 more years. Or to come home and say, don't you think having the longest period of unemployment since the Great Depression has just been a terrific experience? Or I'm glad you loaned me a credit card so I could dump more debt on your children and grandchildren than any senator in the history of Missouri. I mean, she has such a terrific series of positive achievements. We were talking on the way over here, and I tried to get this across on radio because, you know, I came from Atlanta. In fact, I'm a little embarrassed because I'm actually drinking a Diet Pepsi here. You may want to edit that out. But I represented Coke for years. And Coca-Cola has a very simple model. They need to say the words Coca-Cola 7 times a week to remind you that you should drink it. Now, this is a product that goes back to the 1890s. It is the largest single daily brand on the planet. 800 million people a day drink a Coke product. And their core model is simple. In fact, if you watch the golf match this weekend at East Lake in Atlanta, every single caddy was wearing a little thing that said Coca-Cola. I mean, they have a very simple mind. So I start from that premise. My model of politics, which I learned from Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, is figure out what you truly believe, figure out what the right fights are to communicate and win what you truly believe, and then be slow and repetitious. Again, like drink Coke. So I was on several shows today, and I would come back to a couple of basics. National Rifle Association. Todd is an A. Claire McCaskill is an F. So anybody in the state who believes in the Second Amendment, you have somebody who agrees with you, and somebody who is permanently on the other side. Not complicated. Right to life. Todd is an A. McCaskill's an F. McCaskill wants to talk about radicalism. Her party adopted a plank in Charlotte that calls for tax-paid abortion in the 9th month on demand. Now that's about a 20% position. You go around the country and say, do you think children could be aborted in the 9th month or the 8th month? And then you realize you have a president who 3 times voted as a state senator to permit doctors to kill the baby if they survive the abortion. Okay? Let's just be clear where this is all coming down. So let's talk about who's extreme. I think it's extreme to vote for an Obamacare which takes away women's rights to meet with their doctor without a bureaucrat. I think it's extreme to vote for an Obamacare which would limit breast cancer choices. And by the way, would also, from the standpoint of men, potentially limit prostate cancer choices. You start watching these various government bureaucracies. The recent recommendation on prostate testing was made by a panel that had no urologist and no kind of cancer specialist on it. Because after all, they're geniuses. Why would they have to actually know anything in detail when they know everything? And this is the real danger of centralized bureaucratic government. Now, let me draw an example on our side. I deeply favor an American energy independence plan. Our #1 strategy in the Middle East in response to the disaster that's unrolling. And don't kid yourselves. We are watching the Arab Spring turn into an Islamist winter. This is going to be a nightmare. And I was told a few minutes ago that president has now canceled seeing the president of Egypt. You know, listen, this is a big, Egypt is the intellectual and cultural center of the Arab world. Having Egypt drift into an Islamist government is going to be a nightmare. Look at Benghazi. Benghazi was the #1 city in Libya producing terrorists who went to Iraq to kill Americans. I can't imagine why the U.S. ambassador was in Benghazi.
Right. Yeah.
And I certainly can't imagine why he was there with no security. And remember, 2 of the 3 people killed with him were not security. They were retired SEALs working in the consulate who jumped in to try to save his life.
Right.
But he arrived with 1 driver in arguably one of the most dangerous cities in the Middle East. Makes no sense at all, and yet I don't sense any demand for an inquiry. What was he doing? Why was he there? And by the way, CNN has now done this terrible thing, which the left is deeply offended by, because they actually got his diary, and it's truly shocking. They're actually using his diary for news purposes. And everybody on the left who's used to it, if they do it to a Republican, is suddenly horrified. The CNN is so callous, so lacking in concern, that what are they sharing? They're not sharing anything personal. What are they sharing with us? He kept telling the State Department he was worried about Al-Qaeda and he was worried about death threats. Which leads to the question in my mind, why isn't there a demand for an investigation? Right? And I frankly think House Republicans should be dramatically more aggressive than they do. I think the House Republican Committee, the committees that we now chair, should be demanding that we know every message he sent the State Department that involves security. They should be demanding to know why he was there, what were the circumstances, we still don't know where his security was. This is unconscionable. But in addition, I think the House Republicans should move to suspend all aid to Egypt. We have no reason to send our tax money to a Muslim Brotherhood-dominated government that is going to be a disaster in terms of American values. So, it's in the context of that kind of turmoil that I suggest to you that we are committed to an energy independence plan for North America, and our goal should be simple. No future president should ever again bow to a Saudi king. So, I think the choices are going to be very wide. You have in Claire McCaskill somebody who believes in crippling American energy. Under Obama, we've increased the amount of energy we're importing from Saudi Arabia, not decreased it. The fact is that this is an administration that is utterly lacking in seriousness about the larger world. This is an administration which has presided over the longest period of economic stagnation since the Great Depression. There have been 81 months since World War II in which unemployment's been above 8%. 43, over half of them, have been under Barack Obama. And that's with male participation in the workforce dropping to the lowest level in the history of keeping the records. This is a disaster of the first order. Gasoline prices were $1.89 when he was sworn in. They're currently around $3.89 as a national average. I mean, people were talking about Romney's 47%. I thought the right answer was to say, Obama's busy hurting 100%. He hurts every person who drives a car, every person who drives a truck, every person who buys a product delivered to your local store by a truck. He hurts every person who wants to get a job, every family that has a member that can't find a job. He hurts everybody who's going to pay interest on his debt for the rest of their life. Now let's talk about who hurts who. But we have to be much more aggressive and much more willing to carry the argument. So I wanted to come by tonight and simply say to all of you, this is a very, very important Senate race. fact is, we cannot govern if Harry Reid is the Senate Majority Leader. Under the rules of the Senate, it's not possible. Fact is, Claire McCaskill may be as vulnerable as any Democrat in the country. What we need to do is cut through all the media, all the television advertising, and get people back to thinking about which future do they want. Do they want 6 years with a grassroots member of Congress who has actually voted conservative? Or do they want 6 more years with an arrogant, out-of-touch senator who ran over 71% of the state? Remember, Missouri voted 71% against Obamacare, and 2 months later she voted for it. Well, that's not representative government.
No.
And so the choice is extraordinarily simple. I'm an optimist. I was saying this to Todd earlier. Because I'm a historian, and I'm old enough that I actually lived part of it. As Ronald Reagan once said, I knew Thomas Jefferson. In 1940, a freshman senator from Missouri is informed by the Kansas City and St. Louis machines that he has not been obedient, and therefore he will be dumped from the ticket. And he'll have no money, no organization, in an age when there was no internet and no television. And Truman said to the machine, okay, I accept your challenge. He had one old car and one driver. And he crisscrossed rural Missouri, just beating the machines into the ground. And just gave speech after speech after speech where he attacked the machines. And he said, they're right. Something Todd could say. Fact is, Todd's not going to go to Washington to be the establishment senator. He's not going to. Washington let 25 billionaires on Wall Street decide through their super PAC how they ought to vote. Truman won that grassroots campaign. And in 1948, after he'd been picked by Franklin Delano Roosevelt to be the vice president, Truman was so far behind for re-election that in September, the Gallup poll quit taking polls. He said, the race is over, Tom Dewey's going to win, there's no point in worrying. Which is why the famous picture of Truman holding up the Chicago Tribune with the headline, Dewey wins. This huge grin on Truman's face. Well, what did he do? For 6 weeks he pretended he was back in Missouri in 1940, except instead of a car he had a train. And he crisscrossed the country just beating Dewey into the ground. Now, there's a reason that happened. Because the concept of being a show-me state was real. And people looked around and thought, got it. Independent senator, machine. I'm for the independent senator. Down the road, and they're vicious and they're negative. Just remind all your friends, isn't it amazing what Hollywood left-wing money and New York left-wing money can buy? And isn't it a pity that it's all being wasted on somebody who's going to vote with Hollywood and New York? But if you want somebody who's going to vote with Missouri, you have to be for Todd. It's that simple. Now, the key ultimate victory is going to be convincing women that 6 years of McCaskill is much more dangerous than 6 seconds of Todd being wrong. And if women conclude that 6 years of McCaskill is a genuine threat, whether it's Obamacare, or it's national security, or it's the debt, or it's their child being unemployed, I always remind people that Obama's thrilled that he wants to extend your child's right to get your insurance until he's 26. I would like your child to get a job and get their own insurance. Women for Todd Akin public aggressive campaign, ultimately ending up with self-funded full-page ads in the newspaper with people's faces saying, "We know Todd and we're for him." And I voluntarily, I haven't cleared this with you yet or your staff, but I recruited Vicki Schneider over here to reach out and recruit every elected state Republican woman in the whole state to join and help form this. And she agreed a while ago. I only broke one arm, she gave in. But this is the kind of, what you've got to do, you're not going to out-muscle them. But you can out-grassroots them. It will be sloppy, disorganized, but the enthusiasm, the energy, and the drive will drown the outside money. And that is the only way you beat them, is by just having you. So I'm going to quit. I'm going to take questions for a minute or two, if that's all right, Todd. But I want all of you to understand, your instruction tonight is to get this off the website, which I assume it can be up within a day or two. And then I want you to send it to everybody, post it on Facebook, send it out to everybody you can, link to it on Twitter, get it across the whole state. Because this campaign is not only winnable, it's winnable by a shocking margin if we have the nerve to just go right in the teeth of every dollar the left can send in here. And as you do your job here, I will be in Washington very aggressively explaining to the RNC and the Senate committee that there is a nominee in this state who's a Republican, that they have no moral right to withhold any support, and that it's